To every parent who's listening, if you've ever felt you're not a math person, please hear this. Your child does not need you to be an expert. They need you to be present. If you have ever watched your child's shoulders tense over homework, if you've felt your own heart tighten when they say, I don't get it, and if you've wondered why children run away from studying all the time and math feels this hard, take a breath and stay with me. Let's reimagine math and education for the world our children are stepping into. Welcome to the Math Talks, where we go beyond formulas and grades and dive into what truly matters in your child's learning journey. I'm Dr. Garima, a math educator and a mother who is passionate about uncovering the math genius in every child. In this podcast, I speak with leading thinkers, educators, and change makers from around the world to explore how we can raise confident problem solvers and not just high scorers. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, or just curious about how children learn, you're in the right place. Today, we are going somewhere quiet but powerful. We're talking about what happens when math meets mindfulness, about the space between the question and the answer, where fear so often grows, but where curiosity could, about why so many children and parents feel math in their bodies before they feel it in their minds, and about how slowing down might be the very thing that helps our children think deeper, fear less, and truly understand. So, this episode, or in fact, this podcast, is not about giving you another trick or shortcut to score better in mathematics. It's about returning to what actual learning is and what is the core of learning the right way: presence, patience, a breath. So, if you've ever watched your child's shoulders tense over homework, if you've felt your own heart tighten when they say, I don't get it, and if you've wondered why children run away from studying all the time and math feels this hard, take a breath and stay with me. Let's reimagine math and education for the world our children are stepping into. So today's guest brings something rare and beautiful to the world of math education: mindfulness. In a world that tells children to hurry, to compete, to perform, she teaches them to pause, to breathe, and to think. Molly Pooler isn't just a math educator, she's a bridge between the rigor of mathematics and the wisdom of mindful learning. With over a decade of teaching at the university level, designing curricula for Amplify Math, and training STEM faculty in inclusive and engaging pedagogies, Molly has seen firsthand how anxiety shuts down thinking and how mindfulness can reopen it. She's also a registered yoga teacher, weaving presence and compassion into every lesson she designs. Today, we are talking about what happens when we stop treating math like a race and start treating it like a practice. If you've ever watched your child freeze over a math problem or felt your own heart tighten during homework time, this conversation is for you. So, Molly, welcome. It's truly a pleasure to have you here. Your work is, as I told you, is very fascinating. You've taught everything from university level calculus and statistics to future teachers, and you're also a certified yoga instructor and mindfulness practitioner. So this really fascinates me because I'm a health freak myself. So I want to start here. When did you first begin to see the connection between breath, body, and mathematical thinking? So, was there a moment or maybe a student that made it clear to you that math wasn't just happening in the mind, but in the whole being?
Oh, thank you so much. For having me and for having this conversation about mindfulness in math. Something that I don't think we talk about ever, or maybe at least not enough. Um, yeah, I think actually I felt like I was existing in two totally different spaces, um, where I was this yoga and meditation instructor. I was teaching workshops on how to meditate for beginners and mindfulness practices and how to kind of reassess your relationship with your body in a really mindful, holistic way. And then I was teaching high school math, or I was teaching college math. And at first, it felt like the worlds were really not aligned. And over time, as I started to more authentic in myself and my story, I started to realize that these things complement each other. I mean, people have so much math anxiety, math fear, and struggle inside of a problem that I started to utilize the tools I was using in my yoga and meditation classes and workshops inside of the classroom. So I would literally feel the energy shift in my math classroom. Students start to, as you mentioned, the shoulders come up, the faces get tight, the breath, like you don't hear breathing anymore. And I started to realize, like, oh wow, like I can use the same tools in my classes that I can in my mindfulness classes. And students really responded quite positively to that. And I realized that this is not something they realized either that could be bridged and combined.
So in fact, I can resonate with it, that deeply because I also see that a lot of times here in India as well. So I work with children as young as 5 or 6, and I've taught my own kids, and I'm teaching undergrad students in Delhi University, and across the spectrum, you can see that physical signs of math stress. Somebody is chewing their pencils, they just fidget endlessly. While when I was a little child, I used to bite my nails, and I do that now also when I'm stuck with some problem or something like that. And those little shoulders, they tense up the moment they see a worksheet, something like that. So math time isn't a time for thinking for them. It's a time to just somehow survive and just pass through. And it's
Yes.
not just in the classroom. I've seen a lot of parents, telling me that their children get stomach aches, or any kind of headache before the math test also, while they're doing their homeworks as well. So that actually means that, I mean, somehow their bodies are saying that this is not the safe thing that you're doing, right? So my next question is, why do you think so many children, and honestly speaking, adults as well, experience math in their bodies as stress and not curiosity? Why do they take it as stress? What
Uh,
is it about the way we teach and talk about math that turns it into a physical threat?
yeah. Well, where do we begin, right? But I also think it's important to kind of maybe contextualize that body reaction for a moment. So, um, I heard this explanation that I think is really helpful. I think a lot of us can relate to not liking snakes. So I really don't like snakes. But so if you think for a second, if you were to turn your head and suddenly see a snake right there, you would have a reaction in your body where you would go, and we can all kind
Right.
of take a moment to realize I just took a really deep, intense inhale. And that is a physical reaction to, an external stimuli, or like a snake, that my body has a reaction. And so that is what's happening to our students and ourselves, maybe, where we see the worksheet or we see a word problem. I hear this a lot. I see a I'm good with the numbers, and then I see a word problem, and it is equivalent to seeing a snake on the page, right? The body has a reaction, right? And then so these mindfulness tools, right, are about kind of addressing that. But where does that come from? Oh dear. I mean, there's so much as it aligns to mindfulness. It's almost in direct opposition. I don't want to, the word that's coming to mind are like the lies around math education. It feels like a harsh word. I wish I had a better word in this moment, but it's like, you know, everything should be easy, or
Yes.
everything should be easy right away, or struggle is not learning. So, feeling afraid or nervous means I'm doing it wrong. Or these ideas that, the fundamental idea of a math person, right? I get it or I don't. So these are all the kind of mindsets that students have when they are either entering the classroom or starting their homework or studying for a test. They're flooded with all this self-talk and these ideas around, if I don't know how to approach this word problem, I'm bad at math, or I can't do this, or this isn't good. And so all of those ideas are kind of contributing to that like snake reaction that we're
Mm.
having when we are trying to do math, which is, it's so sad, right? Because like I don't, math is can be fun, and like you mentioned, curiosity, right? Like why don't we see a word problem and say, "Oh, I'm having a really intense reaction right now. Like this feels like seeing a snake." Okay, what's
Yeah.
going on here? What's happening in this problem? Why, so there's so much curiosity that can kind of turn that off. But that you're right, that's not what's happening in math education. And I think it is because, we focus on speed, we focus on, content coverage,
Marks.
we focus on, productivity, learning has to look a certain way, understanding has to look a certain way. And so we're just creating all these snakes on worksheets for students.
Absolutely. I think, and this has been ingrained since the very beginning. From a very young age, this thing is put into their mind that their entire identity is what the marks that they get in their exams. And that is the pressure that we are creating. It's not just the academic pressure, it is emotional pressure, it is the social pressure actually which is created in their minds. There is also pressure that kids cry. Why? Because they feel that they're somehow disappointing their parents if they're not doing good in a particular subject, and particularly maths, I think.
Yeah. It
Right.
is. It's so, and math can be such a great place to explore, and be curious and make sense and grow self-esteem and confidence. It's like the super
Absolutely.
tool that we could, and instead it becomes something that really reinforces those negative mindsets and self-talk. And it's quite sad when that happens.
Right. So, Molly, that idea of creating a pause is so profound, because in so many math classrooms, especially here in India, pausing is seen as failing. If you're not writing, you're not working. If you're silent, that means you're stuck. But what you are describing, mindful math, it's about weaving presence into the very fabric of how we learn, right? So let's make this tangible for our listeners. When you train teachers or design lessons with mindfulness in mind, what does that actually look like in practice? Can you walk us through a real moment in a classroom, maybe with older students or even educators, where mindfulness changed the tone of the learning?
Yeah. So I think that a lot of times we tell students like taking a break is great, but then we never model it, right? We never offer it, and then we never do it, right? So we tell students when you get stuck, take a break. But we just say it, we don't actually teach it. We don't explicitly invite students to do that. So it's a concept that is not tangible, right? So inside of a classroom, right, offering breaks and actually doing them inside the classroom, modeling that experience. And so most teachers don't have the same background as me. And so they maybe can't lead maybe a long meditation or something like that, but that's not even necessary, right? If we took this way back to its simplest form, we could just have inside of whatever learning is happening, we could just say that it's time for a break. And we can model what it means to take a pause and just notice what's happening. I'm actually working on some of these mindfulness moments for math classrooms so that teachers can plug in something of mine, right, where it's literally guiding it for, like, you could play this 30-second, you can play this 1 minute during this break. Teachers then can realize that this is approachable, they can do this too, because we could all stop right now and we could say, let's just take an inhale and let's just take a long slow exhale. Let's just pause on that. Okay, let's start again. And so even something as simple as that, modeling that, encouraging that, using positive language around that, instead of saying, oh my God, everybody is so stressed out right now, let's take a pause. You could do that sometimes, but it's also nice to do preemptive pausing so students know they don't have to wait until they get super super frustrated, right? They could start with a breath. You can model starting, before you actually start to do a problem. Let's take a breath. You can pause in the middle of a problem and say, all right, we're going to just take a breath, recenter. And then at the end, you could have them. So offering at different times, really modeling and doing the break rather than just kind of one off saying, if you're spending 10 to 15 minutes on a problem, that's probably too long. you should take a break. Students don't know what that means. They don't understand what that can literally look like.
Yeah. And I think most of the teacher training that happens, it is focusing on either the content or pedagogy, basically what to teach and how to teach. But we don't focus much on the emotional climate of the classroom. So I think what you're saying is absolutely right that, the teacher has to practice this mindfulness first on its own, and then I'm sure every child would be able to do it. And that's how the change can happen. That's how mindfulness can enter the math classrooms.
Yeah, and I think also inside of the classroom or inside of tutoring or at home with your child to say, wow, we've come to a scary problem. Let's let's take a breath. We can really start with a breath. It doesn't have to be this really intimidating body scan or, things that maybe we can do at a later level, or you could plug in one of my meditations inside of it. But it could be something that is literally just taking a slow, deep breath. Remembering that snake example, we are just breathing in. And so to relax and recenter and ground, we have to exhale, right? That quick, right? So a great skill to take with you after this is double the length of your exhale and you will hit a mindfulness moment. And that is a great tool to take with you anywhere.
I think I'm already getting a hang of it. Let's take a deep breath and let's move to the next question.
Exactly. We'll just breathe in and even slower.
Nice. Okay. So, you work with STEM faculty on inclusive excellence, helping them redesign courses so every student can engage. So, what have you learned about how traditional math teaching excludes certain learners, and how can parents create a more inclusive math environment at home?
Yeah, it's a great goal, and I think the first thing that lends itself is a desire, a curiosity to want to include students into the learning process. So, thinking of inclusive math when I work with faculty is really like this is an invitation to listen to students.
Only there is a disturbance at your end. I could not hear it.
Oh
If you could
no.
just repeat.
Yeah. Am I back on?
Yes, yes, that's right.
Okay. It's likely my internet. I apologize for that. But
That's okay.
so for inclusive math with my faculty, when I work with them, I really use it as an invitation for them to be curious, to listen to their students, to talk to them, to reach out and to consider them as whole human beings. That there are other things potentially going on in their lives that are contributing to fear or challenge or missed work or things that are going on in their life. A great principle that we like to take with us is assume good intention. So when we have our students struggling, if I come from a place of the student is not trying, the student doesn't care, the student is uninterested, the student, is not making my class a priority, none of those are going to help me start on a good foot around inclusive education. The thing I like to start with is assume good intention. Everybody wants to do well. Everybody wants to feel good and feel successful and have moments of pride around their learning. And so the assuming good intentions is a really good guiding principle. And the other is to really make sure that what we're saying we care about aligns with the policies and the assessments and the learning process in the classroom. So, for example, if we say something a lot of teachers say is mistakes are okay. Mistakes are okay. I
Yeah.
love that, right? That's such a great mindfulness thing, right? Like revise your thinking, make a mistake, but then nothing in the classroom supports making a mistake is okay, right? We don't
Yeah.
have any pauses in there for self-soothing and reframing what a mistake means. We don't have any policies around revision. We don't have grading practices around making mistakes is okay. So, first, really aligning our humanistic ideas and what we say to students to align with what's actually happening in the classroom, both in the learning, the grading, and the policies and tone.
Yeah. And I can share what happens in Indian households as well. Unconsciously, we parents, I think some 7 or 8 years back also, I used to do that as well. We used to equate. I mean, we usually do that. I have grown more mindful of not saying that now, but of course, I see that happening in a lot of Indian households. A child who's good at math is equated to he'll do good in his exams as well. We need to widen that definition. And one thing I always encourage parents to do is to share their own thinking aloud, especially when they're not sure. For example, while they're cooking, the recipe may ask for, something in, they have to use 500 ml of something. But if you have just 250 ml of cup, so what do I do? What this tells a child is that math is not about knowing everything, it's about figuring out situations. What are you going to do if you have a 250 ml cup and instead of a 500 ml cup? You have to figure things out, right? So in your faculty trainings as well, do you find that once teachers start embracing multiple ways of thinking, I'm sure you must have encountered such things, it changes not just who succeeds but what actually success means.
Absolutely. We have to there's this idea that, the way I was taught and the way that I learn is the only or the right. And so really embracing what everybody is bringing to the table, their own fears, their own challenges, their own successes, and then embracing and asking, well, what do you see? What do you notice? What's curious about this? Instead of focusing on just the right answer. And so that's what happens a lot in our professional development and when I work with faculty is moving away, like reframing the objective of the course of instead of they need to get this skill, right? Well, what are all the things about that skill? And how can a student demonstrate learning in multiple different ways instead of the one way you're thinking of? And most faculty can't imagine another way to think about it. So, what can be really fun for faculty to do with their students is to ask their students, how could you draw this? How could you model this with your hands? How could you describe this to another student? What did you hear me say? What did you see when you looked at this? And asking students to demonstrate what's happening in their own heads can really actually help faculty. I mean, we've got all sorts of curriculum out there that can show you all the different ways you can visualize and model and concrete and all these things. And those are really, really good. But also meeting the students who are literally sitting in front of you at the time and asking them, can you see this another way? Well, what scared you about this problem, or what excited you, or what questions did you have? And that can really open the conversation up. And it actually, a lot of faculty say, but I don't have time. I don't have time for curiosity, which is, my God, like what a sadness. I don't have time to be curious. Nobody has time. And I'm like, so you don't have time for learning, right? Like, what does it matter if we can all like regurgitate? At first, let's come back to what do you define, like you said, as success, as learning? Is it the regurgitation of information? Or is it the ability to make sense of, communicate, and have engagement and connection around this topic?
Right. I think a teacher has to be a learner first.
Yeah.
And the kind of answers the students give, you'll be just amazed by their thinking. And literally, we're just shutting it down by
I
telling them the
know.
answers.
Yeah. And I think that that's exactly it. It's like when we are so answer focused, we lose it all.
Yeah.
And students will sometimes say to me, I love math because there's only one right answer. And I'm like, well, you're probably not going to like my class then, because we are going to be exploring all the different ways we can get to that answer or break that answer or wonder about that answer. I have found that because my classes don't focus on the right answer, it creates a lot of uncertainty for students because they quote know what math is, right? Math is solve the problem, get the answer, feel good or bad because you got it right or you got it wrong. And so
Right.
when we try to change that, and this is what a lot of faculty report as well, the students actually can revolt. They don't want, they're afraid. It's more snakes. I hate that I keep talking about snakes because I'm actually quite terrified of snakes, but it's just, it becomes more
I'm getting to know
uncertainty.
that.
I know. It's more uncertainty, right? Because they've created that, we've created this idea around what math education is, and then they come into a classroom that's trying to do more problem-based learning or sense-making learning, and students are uneasy about that. And so you get a lot of resistance from the students. And I think again, that's when the mindfulness can be really helpful to allow students to regulate their bodies, regulate their breath, and be curious. And if our policies are focused on, and our grading is focused on that learning process, students will come in and get that buy-in and then grow in the ways that we're hoping so that they can love math as well, or at least have a positive experience.
So I think let me have a very concrete example. I mean, explanation of why, according to you, going slow is so powerful in math learning. Because what we often do is speed is often mistaken for intelligence. How fast you're able to solve is how intelligent you are, and you speak exactly the opposite. So, why do you think it is so powerful in math learning?
Well, I'll speak from my own experience. I am not maybe your typical. I was a high performer in math. I was quick. Okay. So you would think that I would, think quick is good, right? Because that is how I was able to perform in math. But actually what ended up happening is every time I would hit something that was hard, that didn't move quick, I would shut down. I didn't have the emotional
Mhm.
regulation to, as a high performer, to meet a challenge. If it wasn't quick and easy, I couldn't do it. So it's a lie, right? This quick and easy is only as it only works when it's quick and easy. And so we have to slow down so that we learn how to engage slower. Because if we want to meet challenges and solve problems and critically think, it is a slower process. And if we're constantly focusing on that quick speed regurgitation, we're never learning how to engage with the process of critical thinking, problem solving, and slowing down. And so it actually hurts all of our students because sometimes my faculty will say, well, what about our high performers? If we change everything, we're going to lose them. And we're not. But they also can benefit from that slowing down. And our students that naturally meet a math problem a little bit slower feel safer doing so, engaging in the problem if they have the tools around how to proceed a little bit slower.
Yeah. And I often see this in children, who are named as slow, according to some school standards, are actually resilient problem solvers outside of it. They're the ones who will tinker with a broken toy for an hour and, figure out strategies or, ask that profound question, why? You know,
Yes.
that stops everyone in their tracks. So I think that their minds are not slow, they're just deep. They think.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we should, they should, if we're going to have all stars in the math class, right? It should be these students that are like, I don't get it. Like that doesn't make sense, right? Like why? What's going on there? Why does it look like that? Why does a fraction part look like that? Why are we using circles? Can we use other shapes? Can we, like those students are the ones that are engaging with math on a deeper level, and it's not encouraged, it's not supported, right? Because it doesn't look the way that we've decided math needs to look, which is just get the answer, you know? And that's not helping anybody because those students that are quick can really learn from those students that are engaging at a different pace than them. And
Yes.
it's frustrating. It's frustrating for the student that wants to go really quick. I don't need to know why. I was a student that did not want to know why. Don't tell me why. I don't have time for why. I just want the answer because it feels good to get it right. And I also need those mindfulness moments and those pauses because in my life, I want to appreciate things. I want to be curious. I want to have a life well spent, not a life that moves super quick and I can't enjoy it. So there's so much learning that can happen here when we adjust the process of learning to really be at a pace of discovery versus answer getting.
Right. And I just keep coming back to parents in, in this Indian system, because I've spoken to a lot of parents, and I think somewhere I was also one of those parents. But when they see their, child thinking deeply at home, they also see the system demanding speed at school. And that's where, they feel that their child is falling behind, you know. And because what I see is that, deep thinking is interpreted as a weakness instead of a superpower, which it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think as we encourage those students and children of ours to embrace that part of ourselves, we can give them that single breath, if we want to keep it really, really simple, that single breath for them to get back into themselves. Because there's also this idea that the conformity of school, right? If I don't look like the students next to me, or I don't look like the people next to me, and we're all independent individual humans. And so if we can take a breath, we can also recenter in our own self esteem and confidence and truth. And then we can try to ask and advocate for what we need. I need another minute without there being shame or frustration. We can kind of take that breath and say, I am a student that needs another minute. And that doesn't mean anything negative. That's just my truth.
So, many children I see, and parents, of course, they feel helpless when math anxiety hits. What are the practical or, some gentle strategies you use to help students regulate their emotions during math?
Yeah.
Or maybe what do you suggest a parent can do to support a child who's actually shutting down while doing math?
Yeah. I think I wish that there was like a one size fits all, but really kind of that idea that we really want to ask questions, and maybe not in that exact moment when our emotions are quite high and we're feeling really frustrated. We might not have like the processing and the verbal skills to articulate our needs in that moment, or to process what's happening or what started it. So having a conversation later can be really helpful to ask the student, what happened is really normal and it's really okay. And do where did you start to notice your shoulders get a little closer to your ears, or when did that pit of your stomach start to like clench really, really tight, or when did you stop breathing? What point did you stop breathing? But inside of the moment, right? We're not going to do that because we're gone, right? If someone were to ask me, again, back to the snakes, if someone were to ask me right when I see a snake and I, have a reaction, oh my God, why are you so afraid of snakes? I wouldn't be able to answer, right? I'm having an emotional response to a scary situation. So in that moment, a physical break from it might be really helpful, right? A validation moment where we're like, wow, this got really hard. This is a little bit overwhelming. I'm feeling frustrated. Let's stand up. Let's stand up. Let's take a walk. Let's touch our toes. Depending on the accessibility of the moment, let's take a drink of water. Are we hungry? Just doing like a really physical check in around bathroom and food and water can be really helpful to just break the physical stimuli of what's going on. And then we can actually maybe get comfortable and take some slow, deep breaths. If you were to take one thing away from this, I would say you could breathe in through your nose for 4 and breathe out through your mouth like a straw for 7 or 8. And if you do that 3 or 4 times, your body will regulate first, and then your mind can start to follow. And it might mean that you have to come back to it later, or it might mean that after you've identified some maybe physical needs or some re-regulation of the system, you could jump back in. But those would kind of be the things that I do first.
I think it's actually the exactly the opposite what we usually do. We react to the situations because
Yeah.
the what's going on in a child's mind, you don't know.
Yeah.
He or she may not be interested at that point as well. So I think these breathing techniques, I'm gonna do it in my classroom for sure.
Yeah. And you know students, when we model it, know that some students, you are breaking up their flow, right? Like they're in it and you just called for a break and now they're mad, right? Like I was just, now I can't remember what I was doing. And that's part of the learning of the tool. As we model the breath breaks or the mindfulness breaks, whatever those look like, students will start to add them to their own toolkit, right? So if we want to say, like, in the future, just notice your shoulders, notice your belly, you could do really easy cues. And then students will start to realize maybe in this moment they didn't need it, but they remember that this is something they can do when they start to notice their belly and their shoulders, and then they can take it later. Absolutely.
So let's get practical and gentle, of course. If a parent is listening right now and thinks, I want to bring this mindful, inclusive, calm math into my home, but I don't want to turn it into another lesson, of course. What would you suggest? Maybe one or two simple rituals or techniques they could start with, tonight, tomorrow, or, without any special materials or training.
Yeah. Well, we can keep it with the breath. I mean, this is something as a human we can offer at any point, at any time, modeling it when we're getting frustrated. Or it can be hard for us. Like, I have a good friend who's like, I don't do mindfulness. Like, I need this for myself. And it's like, okay, so maybe don't pick those moments because you're learning and you're trying to model it. So maybe pick something else that, you know, isn't stressful for you because you're having your own emotional reaction. But yeah, I would say if you're about to help with math homework, say, as you sit down, you could say, let's just start with a breath, and we're going to breathe in through our nose for 4 seconds, and we're going to breathe out like through a straw with our mouth for the count of 7 or 8. And I'm going to count you in and I'm going to count you out. And maybe you just do it once or you do it 3 times and you don't make a thing of it. We're just, oh, you know what? We're just going to get started this way. So I would say if you're going to sit down and start, you could start with 1 to 5 breaths. But if you really don't want to if you have a skittish one that is like, what's going on here? Just do a single breath. I have found that kids love loud exhales with their tongue out. It's one name of it could be lion's breath. Um, and that's a really good one for after, or to like shake it off. If you have an animal, you might notice that your animal like shakes before they do another activity. So another mindfulness practice you could take with kids is a shake off. Like, I'm literally going to shake off what we just
Mhm.
did or what we did before. So if you're going to sit down and you have more of a physical mover and shaker, instead of taking that breath, you can say, okay, we're going to do a wiggle. We're going to do a mindful, you don't have to call it a mindful wiggle, but it is a mindful wiggle. And we're going to shake off the day before we start this. And then maybe at the end, we're going to shake off that practice and we're just going to like wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. And it really also does the same kind of thing.
This is so much fun.
Yeah, and you guys might with your kids, you might find that you add a song to it. I personally have a playlist called my Shake It Off playlist, and and that's just what you do. You think about your animal for a second, right? They really do shake off between activities, and we don't shake off. And so it's a great physical, mindful activity for students that are a little more concrete, a little more wiggly, to instead of taking a seated breath, you can do a wiggle and that will offer the same relief, the same opportunities.
Okay. So, with AI and automation, which is rising, we keep hearing about AI a lot these days. What role do you see for mindfulness and human centered teaching in the future of math education? How do we prepare children for a world that values not just computation, but calm, creative thinking?
Yeah. I teach a lot online, which means a lot of people are like, "Oh, everybody must be cheating in your class all the time with AI." And so it's asking better questions, right? I think if we can meet this moment, like we've been saying with all things, right? What happens in math happens everywhere. Can we be curious about how this tool can enhance the human component of math learning and the human opportunities of thinking that can't be replicated inside of AI, or that AI can support the curiosity. And I think when we kind of come from the same thing that you and I have been talking about this whole time, being curious, asking questions, slowing it down, if instead of saying, oh my goodness, they can do everything on AI, AI is this, AI is that, we can instead take a breath, relax, into our reaction to it and be curious. Well, what does learning look like with this as a tool that either I support students in how they're engaging with this tool, or the questions that I ask so that the learning is more human and the AI cannot replicate it. What does that mean? You know, it can drive us into some better questions. And I found my students are relying on AI now for many reasons. I've asked them, you copied that from AI. Why? Why did you feel like that was the right move when you're not supposed to do that? You're supposed to have your own thinking. And they give wonderful answers, wonderful human answers. I felt like I didn't have enough time. I felt like my thinking wasn't good enough. I felt like, my ideas on their own needed to be, better. I wasn't sure. I didn't feel like I could make a mistake, right? So that comes from the same place, right? It comes from the same place. It's just a new tool that students are able to access. And so if we adjust our policies, our tone, if we're more inclusive, if we talk about it, if we ask different questions, we can meet this moment in a way that can really support our very human students for very human math thinking.
I feel, I mean, I see a lot of students putting questions to ChatGPT, getting the answers, doing their homework, and stuff like that. And I also feel in a way that they've stopped thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
And
that's a very story. I think AI or ChatGPT has to be used wisely.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Well, and I also think it's kind of like the mindfulness breaks, right? Like who's responsible for teaching us how to use something, like it's a tool, right? Much like a breath or a wiggle or a break or remembering to go to the bathroom or drink water. Like these are all things that are hard to do. There's so many things we have to do to like think. And so being assume good intentions, it can be really hard to assume good intentions around students use, but if we assume that they're not doing it maliciously, right? They're doing it, there's some sort of obstacle or challenge that is making them, you know do this or not want to think. And so how can we make thinking accessible? How can we make thinking valid, relatable, relevant, worthwhile? Like these are questions that we can explore in our math classrooms, and I think math is like the best place that we can kind of uh, adjust this. Like what we maybe we haven't been encouraging a lot of thinking in math education, right? If we're answer getting, that's not really thinking. So now AI is forcing a lot of math educators to reconsider what's valuable in their classroom. It's not enough to just
yes.
say show your work. AI can show the work now. So we have to go even deeper. We have to think about multiple ways, ask different questions, explore why using AI to replace thinking is only hurting ourselves. Students don't know that. They think if the point is to get done quick and to get done right, then and they're a different kind of a learner, they're going to use AI. So we have to change the way that math education is being taught so that we can support and encourage thinking.
Absolutely. I completely agree to this. Okay. So the next question is, many parents carry their own math trauma. And I've seen a lot of parents, I mean, say kids saying that they don't learn, they hate maths. And it's because of the parents, because they say that they hate maths. So what would you say to a parent who wants to support their child but feels anxious or inadequate around math themselves?
Yeah, I think some self talk, like some adjusted language, is really powerful. So if you were to take one, you might use the word, I don't feel confident in math yet. You could add the word yet, is a really powerful, simple way to adjust a mindset, even if you don't believe it, right? Because a lot of parents are like, what do you mean yet? I'm never touching a fraction again. But you could just say, like, I had a hard time with fractions and I don't feel confident in them yet. Let's explore this together. So I
Yes.
think at a very simplistic level, our language really matters. And even if our feelings don't align with language, we can use aspirational language, fake it till you make it, but not in an inauthentic way, in a real like growth mindset kind of way. We can just add the word yet at at the simplest level when we're talking to our kiddos about that is yeah, and validating, right? Like the problem maybe isn't my ability with math, but the way that I was taught math and the way that I've defined math success. So if we want to go a little bit deeper, we could just say like, yeah, I always thought I had to be fast at math to be good at math, but now I'm wondering if that's true, you know? And so inviting in a curious mindset, adjusting, discussing those beliefs that we've carried, that we were taught, we were told, explicitly told, you're not good at math because X, Y, and Z, and just validate that and add some aspirational language and just be really honest, and then taking in some mindfulness strategies inside of that, because the is going to get dysregulated as well. And so the parent is dysregulated. The child is relying on the parent to help them. The parent's totally dysregulated. Now the child's dysregulated. It's like a mess. Of course, it's a mess. And so if we can
Okay.
notice that physical dysregulation as the cue, instead of my body tells me I'm dysregulated before my brain. I don't think like, oh, I'm about to get in trouble here. Like, oh, I'm about to be really overwhelmed. It's I can feel it in my body. So if our heart starts to beat really fast, or we start to
Yes.
get the sweats, or we start to like just kind of notice our body, it's a great cue to take a pause, so that we can participate back in.
And how about, the parent and the child trying the questions together? I mean, that's another thing which the parents can do, even if they're not comfortable. It's always good to explore or do questions with the child. I think that's a good practice that the parents can do.
Yeah. And I think it's really validating, right? Because children look up to their parents, and so if we can say this is hard, it's really validating for everybody, right? Hearing, oh wow, there's something, it's not that there's something wrong with me, this question is hard, or this wording is hard, or this, the strategy I'm told that I have to use, this is hard, we should take a break. That's my go-to, right? Like if it feels like I need to put more effort, if I'm feeling pressure to do harder, more, that I now have learned through a lot of practice is the cue to back off and be gentle and then come back in later.
Yeah. Okay, so Molly, this is one question which I always ask the educator. If you had just 5 minutes with every parent in the world, what would you want them to remember about math, mindfulness, and their child's mind?
Oh, gosh. I think I would say like there's so much learning that can happen in the space between doing. I think that would be it, is that, taking a really intentional break is just as important as putting pen to paper, because we need regulation for us to be able to engage with hard things. And so I think when it comes to mindfulness and math, I think that's, the key thing is that there's value in intentional pausing, intentional breathing, intentional breaking, that it is just as important to take care of our bodies as it is to finish the math problem, and that and that the speed and the effort and the productivity is not actually the learning.
I think you just summed the entire podcast through this line. Thank you so much, Molly. It was very enlightening. It was very interesting to talk to you, not just for your wisdom, but for the quite way you offer it. And you've reminded us of something we so easily forget: that a child staring into space isn't stuck; they're thinking.
Yeah.
That a deep breath before a problem isn't a delay; it's a doorway. That math was never meant to be a race; it was meant to be a relationship. So, to every parent who's listening, if you've ever felt you're not a math person, please hear this. Your child does not need you to be an expert. They need you to be present. Someone who stays near when the problem feels hard. Someone who whispers, I am here. Take your time. Let's do it together. That is not a small thing, that is everything. And beneath all of it is one simple truth: learning is not a transaction, it's a relationship. And like any relationship, it cannot be rushed. It grows slowly, imperfectly in the space between two people who trust each other. So, tonight, when your child opens their math book, you have to pause first, you have to breathe and say, let's sit with this together. So, that single shift from pressure to presence changes everything. So, if this conversation moved you, share it with another parent who needs permission to slow down. Molly, thank you for your generosity, your calm, and your quiet revolution. You can find Molly's work in the show. In the show notes. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and please don't rush childhood. Live it completely. Thank you so much, Molly.
Thank you. It was great. I appreciate it.